our political expert, I think Middle East expert, Scott Lucas, and we're going to be talking in just a minute about Afghanistan and what is going, well, is there anything going well in Afghanistan? And what is going wrong in Afghanistan? Though, if you are a die-hard resistor, how dare me say anything is going wrong in the Middle East? We're doing exactly what our fearless president wants to do, whatever. And God bless him. Joe Biden's done a hell of a lot of good for this country, but doesn't mean we have to suck up to him, for God's sakes. And yeah, shit is going horribly wrong in Afghanistan. I wish in the last 24 hours things had gotten better, but let's hear from Scott in just a moment. I'm going to do a quick plug for Scooch Case. Look, buy their cases, email them, tell them you bought them because of the show, so they'll pay me more money. All right, Scooch Case. I wouldn't endorse something that wasn't a good product, and it really is. But let's jump right into the news. So, Scott, tell me, has anything gotten any better since yesterday?
There hasn't been another explosion today, and I'm not saying that to be flippant, but
yeah,
it's like at least because when we had the blast yesterday, and the death toll's up to about 170 now. There was the warnings that have come out that might not be the end of it. That this group that's responsible, this group that we can explain, talk about Islamic State, Khorasan, that they weren't finished. But no explosions today. But obviously the death toll from yesterday continues to rise. So more than 150 Afghans. We've got, I think, 14 was the latest count on U.S. fatalities, and three British nationals. Now they may be dual nationals. Afghan, UK. That's just come out in the last 15 minutes.
Largest set of casualties in one sitting in about 10 years, other than like a plane crash or something for the U.S. Armed Forces.
Yeah, so it's the largest casualties, I think, from a bombing. That's actually a good point to try to reach back and think about it. I mean, Baghdad, of course, in Iraq has had a series of bombings that have
Beirut.
Beirut has had blasts, although the biggest blast, of course, was the detonation at the port last year. Syria, which I cover on a day-to-day basis, of course, this stuff is regular, but usually.
Well, yeah, and I meant, sorry, Scott, Beirut. I meant in the 80s and Reagan and. Those were Marines, I think, weren't they?
You go back. I mean, Beirut was the biggest, as it were, U.S. mass casualty event. I think it was in the area of more than 250.
Yeah,
when they hit the Marine barracks
big
back in the early in '82. But no, in terms of where we are here, the Islamic State Khorasan, which is a relatively small group. I mean, still only 2,000 members last year. They have grown, but they've gotten exactly what they want out of this. They've gotten international publicity because it's horrible. If it bleeds, it leads. And when you strike civilians, and although they took out Americans as well, which they want to do, look, they knew they were going to wipe out Afghan civilians, and that would be their way in, as it were, to make their point. But beyond that, the evacuations are winding up. I mean, European countries have wound them all up today. I think Belgium, in fact, wound up yesterday. Spain wound up today. New Zealand wound its operations up today. The Brits have said they'll stick around till close to when the Americans bug out, which formally will be next Tuesday. But the Brits, I think, are pretty much said it's only a matter of hours now before they send their last flight out. The emphasis over the weekend will be getting the military out, the guys who have been there overseeing the evacuations, the civilians who have been assisting with the effort, the foreign nationals, and then maybe a few more folks who can make it to the airport. But it's almost impossible now to get to the airport because they've extended the perimeter. So if you aren't inside the perimeter now, you're not likely to get there.
Yeah, I think at this point, the people that are, Americans that are there, you're going to be there a while. I think the Secretary of Defense, whose name escapes me at the moment, Lloyd Austin. Yeah,
Lloyd Austin. Yeah, yeah.
Because I just don't hear about him enough.
Yeah.
I think he said they were going to continue to do, everything they could to get Americans out, but short of desperate night helicopter runs under the cover of darkness in some of these faraway provinces where Americans may be stuck or stranded or whatever. I mean, it's going to be pretty futile if you're in Taliban territory and you're an American. You really got to hope and pray, if you're the praying type, that they don't start going around executing people.
Yeah, what the Brits actually signaled a couple days ago, and now this will be the American message now is if you're a foreign national, try to make your way to a land border, and there is one point that is open, Spin Boldak, which is in the south of the country in Kandahar province, across from Pakistan. People have been moving across there, but there's a long wait there, and if you're
it's got to be a long trip. You're kind of exposed.
Yeah.
Right.
Afghanistan, not a small country. Yeah. And so there's that. I mean, the Iranians over in the west of the country, even further away from Kabul, of course, have been taking refugees on a temporary basis. But an American going into Iran could be a bit dicey as well.
Yeah, you might not leave.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the Hotel California, the Mideast. Yeah. You can check in, but you can never leave.
Never leave, at least until the nuclear talks are completed, which could be eternity. So. Yeah, we're talking to Afghans here in the country. I mean, I've got a fantastic person, writer for EA Worldview, who's doing a couple pieces now on schools in Afghanistan. These folks are going to try to keep the schools going for girls as well as boys. So
and sorry, Scott, is that the person you recommended to me recently that we should talk to?
No, that's someone else, but I can recommend this person.
Yes, I was going to say, recommend this person too. That sounds super interesting.
Yeah. So the reporter's name, the writer's name is Deepa Kalakuri, who is initially an Indian journalist, but now based in France. And I met her through a great program in Dublin. This is the way the world works. And so now she's been writing pieces for EA Worldview. We'll have a big piece up on Monday about one of the local, this guy, this is a story about Afghanistan, the thing that I like to find out about. You learn about, he's 12 in 2004 when his school is burned down to the ground by the Taliban, because the Taliban had control of his area in Kandahar. And his father had been a big activist for education for girls as well as boys. So he says, that's it, I'm following my father's footsteps. And he, under Pen Path is the name of the program, either opens more than 100 schools and 35% of the students are girls. And he has committed he's going to try to keep them open, whatever happens now. And we will see if he's able to do it with the Taliban imposing their social system. So, it's that type of story that we're trying to keep track of, which is happening outside Kabul, happening on the ground. And I hate to say, it's going to be a wait and see process, I'm afraid.
Yeah, there's so much going through my head right now. And that is, man, we could probably do these at 11 o'clock every day. What time is it there?
5 o'clock in the afternoon.
5. So. Okay. So hopefully, get all your English friends to, your British friends to know we're on at 5 o'clock once in a while. And we can get some of them chatting with us too. Even in the comments, but there's so many things going through my head right now, especially just thinking how tough that's going to be to do with girls if the Taliban are, strict with the codes for dress and everything with women. And I do want to get into that. And I also want to get into some of the broader ramifications of what life might soon look like in Afghanistan too. If I could remember to get back to those 2 points. And though at the moment, what else do we know that you can think of kind of since yesterday, so we can give everybody just an update? I'll kind of be quiet, and you did a little bit, but tell us what else you know from that's changed in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the top line, from what happened after the blast, and then in Kabul, beyond it, is the top line is that the Taliban, who are saying 28 of their people were amongst the dead yesterday. Now that may well be true. It may well be a bit of spin to say, look, we're not the bad guys here. We took the casualties, but they are talking to the Americans about extending the security perimeter in the remaining days for the evacuation. So that's sort of a de facto Taliban-U.S. cooperation. Now, whether that continues once the Americans are out of the country, that's going to be a broad political issue, which we can talk about, because the implication of what Joe Biden said yesterday, which is the second war on terror, which is effectively what he said, is, well, if you're going to go after, say, ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, who carried out the bombing, are you going to work with the Taliban to do it, given that the Taliban are effectively rivals of ISIS? But in Kabul, the big announcement today, moving politically, is the Taliban say, and again, will it happen? Do we trust them? Oh, we're going to have an interim government, and this interim government will have various factions in it. So it won't just be Taliban leaders, but we'll have non-Taliban leaders, whether that's former President Karzai, Dr. Abdullah, whether it is members of other ethnic communities who are involved in that. And that's a wait and see issue, because it could be they're saying that just to be nicey nice, especially after yesterday. But it could well be that, yeah, they realize that they are not going to be able to establish authority without trying to build links with other parts of the Afghan community. But beyond that, beyond Kabul, there's no picture I can give you that's a single picture, because the thing about the Taliban is they aren't like one organized massive group. I mean, it's not like, I'm not sure the Republicans are one party right now, given the Trumpists within it, but it's not like the Republican Party, and it's not like the Democrats, right? You've got various local factions within the Taliban. And so the guys in Kabul might be saying, all right, we're going to have an inclusive government. We're not going to crack down on women's rights. We're not going to limit social space. They could say that in Kabul, but if you get a local Taliban faction in the south of the country, they may be far stricter. Like the difference between Washington, D.C. and where I grew up, Alabama, right? Like Alabama, we don't hell right to choose. Where did that come from? So,
well, you got the right to choose your AK versus your Uzi, my friend. Yeah. You can choose between those two things.
And the right to choose not to get vaccinated. So, it's not exactly like Afghanistan's a federal system, but it is Afghanistan's a
shit. Well, wait. A federal system. That was the other thing I wanted to think about too. Real quick. We'll keep this going, but I was thinking about this earlier, because you need administrators, you need diplomats, you need a lot of things to run a government. Now, you can put a gun to somebody's head. I think Saddam did a lot in certain cases. Even some of his representatives. Can't remember that guy on TV for all that Baghdad time that was, the official spokesman for, remember that guy?
Baghdad Bob.
Yeah, I think he eventually got arrested. But who becomes their UN ambassador? Like that person becomes complicit, but you need somebody that's pretty smart to start dealing with the World Bank if they'll deal with you. So I don't think this isn't the same Afghanistan that it was, when they took over. The public is different. They're better educated. They're better connected. They've had the internet, at least some of them. So it's not the same. It's not the same place. Sorry, that's been wanting to come out.
That's a really relevant thought, Rev, in terms of how you have to read it each day, because their spokesperson, effectively the reach out guy, is a guy named Mr. Mujahid, and Mr. Mujahid gave press conferences very soon from after, when the Taliban came into Kabul, and would put out the lines of inclusion, and it's amnesty for everybody who worked with the government, and we're not going to punish everybody. He has given a sit-down interview with the New York Times, which I think was featured yesterday morning, I think. Mm-hmm. So, they are, that if you're talking about de facto UN guy, he's the de facto guy giving the message out to the international community. Again, I don't want to get too complicated here, but it's really complicated.
We got time.
there's not a single like overall Taliban leader in terms of a formal designation. So
Right, that's true. People might not know that, right? It's kind of like
yeah,
a band of musicians trying to decide whether to stay together or not.
yeah, or basically like, is it the guy who's on lead vocals who's actually the head of the band, or is it really the guy who's on drums?
So
Who
Phil
actually
Collins or Peter
no,
Gabriel?
screw Phil Collins, the band, maybe. You Levi Helm with the band, right? Is it really like you got Levi and Helm, their version of Levi Helm running the whole show from back? So to extend this comparison, bizarre comparison we're on now, Rep, that
Uh-huh.
you're kind of the guy who's on on lead vocals, or has been technically, is a guy named Akhundzada. Now he came out in 2016. The previous Taliban leader had been assassinated by the Americans, and it's like, hey, we designate this guy. But from all we can tell, the political director, the guy that really is running the show, is a guy named Mullah Baradar. He was the guy who
Mullah
was
Baradar.
yeah,
Can
Baradar
you
was in the
do you even can you type that in there?
yeah, so absolutely.
Um,
So
because the cool thing about HAPS is, as I give a little quick sidebar, Peter, thank you, my friend, for joining in and listening. And one of these days, my brother, we got to get your voice in on this discussion with our great friend Scott Lucas, because you got some journalism chops, man. Taliban head Mullah, how did you say the last name?
Baradar, right?
Baradar.
Baradar.
So
Yeah.
look, Mullah, that's like a title kind of, isn't it? But the
No.
the 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 thing about HAPS is this stays forever, right? I mean, unless I delete it, this stays up. So people are going to be able to come back. So anytime you got something like that, type it in if you want, that you think could be interesting for people to know as they read through the chat. Because I mean, I've been listening to CNN way more than I had been since Biden got in, and I didn't know this. This was the guy that was kind of in charge. So to me, this is really a great way to do this, Scott. I really appreciate having you here.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, just to run with it, the Mullah title is a religious title.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Unfortunately, in America, it's often used in a pejorative sense. Like whenever they refer to the Iranians, it's the
Right.
Mullahs over there.
That's why I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the term, the superior, like the top term in Iran and Iraq is Grand Ayatollah, for example, but in the Taliban movement, it is Mullah. And so folks might know that the reason why you have this religious leadership is that these activists, and they are activists, I don't agree with them to say the least, but they're activists.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that they train up in Pakistan at religious schools, at madrasas, and they get their religious training through Pakistan, and then of course many of them go back into Afghanistan. This goes all the way back to the 1980s, the fight against the Soviets. Off you go. So the person who was in charge in 2001 was Mullah Omar.
And yes, Mullah Omar.
And that was the person who the Americans had to decide whether they were going to deal with him to try to have Osama bin Laden, as it were, released from Afghanistan to stand trial, international trial, or whether the Americans were going to go military and overthrow the Taliban, and they chose the latter. Something which is still a point to be debated even to today. But the idea of saying this is that because of the nature of Afghanistan, which is a very diverse country, a lot of rural areas, because it's in a civil war situation, and because a lot of civil wars, you have to look at the neighboring countries, it's not like you have a single unified leadership, because if you have a single unified leadership, it's easy to get picked off and killed. And so therefore, you have a much more diverse leadership across the country. And we just happen to hear one or two names and so on. And it's not until you take national power that you see actually how they're going to set themselves up in a situation where you have to establish national authority, which is where we are right now. Baradar, I think, is the guy to watch if I'm an analyst to start with. But then again, I would also look at, they've got a designated defense chief who was a former designated head of defense secretary, technically, who was a former Guantanamo Bay detainee and was released.
Oh, okay. Is this the guy that they released? Yeah. There's several of these guys they've released, right, from Gitmo.
Baradar was released in 2018,
and so he's the de facto head.
But
Well,
the fact
that
of
does
it,
not going to go well for trying to close Gitmo, for God's sakes, which
yeah.
needed to be
So
never needed to be opened, honestly. But in my
so
opinion,
the he was not the head was not in was not. I don't think he was in Gitmo. He was held by the Americans, however, for 8 years. He may have
okay,
been held at Bagram. And what happened there, again, this is why it's so complex. We'll hear a lot about how the Pakistan support the Taliban. They're linked to the Taliban. Pakistan always has played a double game. They've always played a double game of having connections with the Taliban, but at times working with the Americans as they try to maneuver their situation. And they, in effect, worked with the Americans to capture Baradar in 2010. He then does 8 years. As you start to move back to a political path, look, we're going to have to talk to the Taliban at some point. He's released in 2018, right?
uh,
And so, and you'll hear a lot of right-wing American press will say immediately, "Oh, these guys were detainees, and they were, and the Taliban are brutal. We all know that. But when they say they're detainees, realize that when these guys got out, it wasn't that the Americans had gone all soft. It's that at some point the decision was made, not only by the Americans but by other countries. If we're going to get a political resolution in Afghanistan, we have to engage with the Taliban. We don't like them, but we have to engage with them, which is
right,
really where
and
we were going through the Trump years
and I mean
until,
that's tough for maybe the average person watching the show to digest. I mean, you know a lot about it, and I imagine it's tough for you to digest that we have to work, with people like this that we certainly have major disagreements with. Hey, Perry Pilot, the we'll get your question here in just a second, but having this res- having to deal with these folks is just the reality of it, and I don't think our politicians should um, bandy about any sense of well, these are bad actors, we're not going to deal with them, and have some kind of tough line. Look, it is what it is. You got to talk to these people 100%.
well, again, and I'm always like talking to you, Rev, because here, unlike, when I do a lot of other TV and radio work, I can get personal here, right? I don't have to just
Yeah,
be analyst
that's
stuff.
what I yes.
And, and, my wife, who is my rock, right? Leslie, and she says, look, and she told me this morning because, I'm having all these discussions about Taliban and ISIS-K and the Haqqani movement, which some people are labeling Al Qaeda. We can discuss that or explain that in a bit. And she says, look, you're not going to go soft on the Taliban, are you? The idea that we have to work with the Taliban because of ISIS. And no. I'm not going to go soft on the Taliban in terms of the fundamental we always start off with, which is that in terms of rights and space and a future for all Afghans, it's unlikely we're going to get that from the Taliban. So I'm not going soft here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you've got is in terms of the immediate situation, and indeed the situation when you couldn't get the legitimate Afghan government over the past few years, you couldn't keep the Taliban outside of the tent entirely because
Right.
you couldn't militarily.
Well, you said they controlled something like 3/4 of the country, kind of ish, more or less. And you know what? Quickly too, the what is it? What is it? K now? What is it? Al Qaeda. Which group is calling themselves something K?
I'm just typing here very quickly, which is
ISIS Khorasan. Yeah. So this battle between ISIS Khorasan and the Taliban, right?
Yeah.
Am I right? Those two?
Yeah.
It's possible that could, break out into a larger conflict and the Taliban lose ground, right? I mean, we could be having to deal with, multiple groups in Afghanistan going forward, even diplomatically or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point here, because it'll tie nicely into Perry Pilot's question in just a minute, is that ISIS Khorasan started in 2015. And again, it gets support from the main Islamic State movement at that point. This is when ISIS in Iraq is holding about 1/3 of the country. For example, they've declared the caliphate. And the idea is, all right, well, we'll have a caliphate across Afghanistan and Pakistan. Khorasan is a name from medieval times, which stretches from the Middle East all the way across to the Himalayas, right? So it's just like that whole area. And the uh, but in looking at ISIS Khorasan, they're very much dealing with local conditions, right? It's like these are Afghans, these are Pakistanis. This is what they want out of their religious and social views in that part of the country. Um, and so, sorry, Rev, thank you for the message.
No, but you know what's funny?
I got
I
wonky
just
on my
typed
camera.
that, and I thought, wait, maybe he means politically, and I didn't.
No, I got it. So I got it on the screen. So sorry, folks. I'm sitting here looking.
No,
like
I'm doing it too.
Sitting here looking like one of the characters on the Muppets dancing about here, right? So ISIS Khorasan, the thing about them is they've never been that large. It's not like they've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of fighters. We're talking about numbers in the thousands. But they pack a punch in what they can get in publicity because they carry out these attacks. They attack maternity hospitals, they attack girls' schools, they attack foreign nationals. They're doing it to get the headlines. So could they be a national resistance, a national fight against Taliban? No. I mean, right now they're mainly based up in the northeast of the country. That's where the roots of the movement are. But they will be, as it were, a local movement or a regional movement within Afghanistan who aspire to be something more by getting more and more fighters and by trying to get more and more people. The difficulty in Afghanistan is to get more and more fighters, to get more and more people. Afghanistan is got many different ethnic groups. It's got many different groups in terms of, as it were, tribal affiliations. So how do you get them to buy into your overall ideology, like the Islamic State is? So I think, in other words, they become a local group, a regional group that gets international headlines. That means it's more of a story of fragmentation in Afghanistan and the inability of Taliban to get the authority. So, you've got that from one side, and then you've got this great question from Perry Pilot, which is that in the east of the country as well, which is in the Panjshir Valley, so this is north of Kabul, that you have a resistance movement. And this is a long-running resistance movement. The leader of the resistance movement is named Ahmed Massoud. And I'll type that up in a moment once you're talking, Rev. But Ahmed Massoud's father was the man who, the Lion of Panjshir, who fought the Soviets. He fought other groups that were involved in the Afghan civil war. He fought the Taliban, and the Taliban assassinated him 2 days before 9/11. So his son, leader of that local movement, he has fighters up there in the Panjshir Valley. He is joined by a former vice president, Mr. Saleh, who then comes on board and says, well, let's have a resistance. Let's get rid of the Taliban. The reality is that they probably have enough fighters in the Panjshir Valley where they can hold out against the Taliban. They can't be wiped out. But to actually make this into a national movement or to move into Kabul, no. They would have to have outside support in terms of arms and resources, given the fact that the Taliban, especially having gotten a lot of arms in recent weeks, you might have noticed, still are going to be able to I think, they can hold their areas against any movement right now.
Sorry, look at that. You just popped right onto our screen. Fantastic. Hang on. Let me move myself over here and say hi to Marianne. Wow. Hello.
Hi.
Great to see you. Oh my gosh. I just threw out
I just finished my broadcast and I saw an invite and I said, oh wow, everyone's talking about Afghanistan. Let me just give it a few seconds to it and then I get back to my show.
Oh, fantastic. Wow. We've got you for a couple of minutes. Marianne Okan is she's like a huge voice in Africa, Scott, and just a fantastic reporter and a good friend. And yeah, give us your perspective, Marianne, on what's going on, because I really want to talk to you soon about the children in Nigeria and all of these things going on. But let's hear about Afghanistan.
Well, I mean, the case of Afghanistan is pretty complicated, and you might not necessarily agree with where I'm coming from. There are people who blame President Biden for what's happening now, but then we have to cast our minds back to the fact that before he even became president, when he was vice president, he did not really like the idea of, sending more soldiers, into Afghanistan, because he didn't think it was a war that we could win or the US could win. He thought that it was, unnecessary. But I think the mistake that President Biden made, this is my personal opinion, is that
Mm-hmm.
he pulled out the troops before they thought about the people who work or were associates of the U.S. government, because you pull out the troops and then you remember that, oh my goodness, we need to pull out our sources, our resources, all the people who've been interpreting, and so it's somewhat of a mess. I mean, yesterday I was listening to the radio and I heard when a British security spokesperson was hinting at the fact that there might just be an attack close to the Kabul airport, and I was thinking to myself, should the U.S. government and British government cut and run immediately, or should they just continue the evacuation process, or underestimate the fact that these people, ISIS-K, can be really brutal? And before I could think about it, we heard that there was a hit, and
Mm.
soldiers died, people died. It's a messy situation, unfortunately. There's really not a lot that the government can do. I heard President Biden talking tough about, making sure that these people would pay, but it means that then America has to renegotiate with the Taliban government, because you cannot deal with ISIS-K without having an insider, and the insider has to obviously be the Taliban. So something you were running away from, you might just have to um, rethink it. It's really a messy situation for the U.S. Unfortunately, my heart goes out to the soldiers who have died, their families, people who have lost their lives, even the Afghans that were caught in that whole bombing. It's really tough, but there's just a lot of politics to it. There's a lot of security information that's gone under that we really don't know. But it's tough. It's a tough. I mean, it's tough to be an American president today, right now.
It is tough to be an American president right now. Scott, you're much more of an expert than I am, and Marianne is definitely on top of it. What are you feeling there?
Marianne, first of all, it's great to meet you this way across HAPS. So thanks to Rev for bringing us together. I think what Marianne said there is absolutely spot on a couple of important points. I think, first of all, Rev, you know it, that the withdrawal, I think there are reasons why the withdrawal was going to have to take place. Um, but the question is how you withdraw. Do you withdraw in a manner which tries to protect as many Afghans as possible, as long as possible, as well as getting NGO workers out, journalists out? We didn't see that. We saw an announcement from Joe Biden, which was driven by the fact that in April, what was the date for getting out? September 11th. Now, that's a domestic political signal for getting out by then. And because of that timetable, which he now says, oh, well, I had to do it because it was agreed between the Trump guys and the Taliban, because he never thought, look, do this sensibly. When they left that military base, Camp Bagram, overnight, they give up leverage versus the Taliban, but they also give up capability within the country, including for an evacuation. They could have evacuated people through Bagram if they still had the base. But the point, Marianne, I really want to pick you up on this because I'm still working through it. You're absolutely right that if they want to deal with ISIS-K in an effective way, they can't do it through the Northern Alliance, because the Northern Alliance doesn't exist as it did in 2001 as the effective force. They can't do it through that movement in the Panjshir Valley because they're not large enough. So they have to do it through the Taliban. But that immediately puts you in a position where you have to engage with the Taliban. And I don't think they've thought it through, Marianne, because I think what I heard from Joe Biden last night wasn't we're going to engage with the Taliban. This is how to work with it. I was getting the impression, which is he didn't say drones, but it was like, we can just use drones and we can just bomb the hell out of them. And we're going to have targeted assassinations and wipe them out. But you can't even carry out targeted assassinations without assets on the ground. It's not that easy to just drone folks. So I'm at a loss as to where the Americans go next when you talk about the political tension of talking to the Taliban versus the military realities.
Oh, sorry, I muted you, Marianne. Hang on.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a really tough place where President Joe Biden finds himself. America and its allies. I mean, already Russia and China have made moves to, I hear, recognize the Taliban government. So it means that America has to also join in recognizing the Taliban government to be able to work with them. It's tough. I mean, there are certain other things that I'm thinking about that I would like to say, but I'm not sure I want to say them, so I'll just keep that to myself.
Feel free,
But
though, Marianne. You
but
can't say anything
I
here.
want to try to link what's happening in Afghanistan to what's happening in Nigeria. It might not be the same thing, but if you know, if you follow stories, you can tell that Nigeria is also in the midst of a terror war. We're fighting with different kinds of terrorists rather. We have Boko Haram, which has been there for more than a decade. Um, and its major deal is that they do not accept Western education, and so whatever has Western education written on it, they fight against it, and they've kidnapped school children over and over again, girls and boys. They've bombed many places. But now, what Nigeria is dealing with is banditry, and this is as a result of um, the Gaddafi guns in the Sahel region, which has been coming down to West Africa. And so countries around the Sahel in West Africa have to deal with these bandits. That's what they call them. But they're terrorists. Unfortunately, the nomenclature here in Nigeria is bandits and unknown gunmen. Um, and they have come into the country, and they have partnered with or rather got disguised themselves as herders. Now in Nigeria, the average nomad or herder carries a stick and just goes around with its cattle. But right now, these herders are carrying AK-47s. They're killing people. They're kidnapping them. They're burying them in shallow graves. Girls cannot go to school. Boys cannot go to schools. They go to schools and take at least 300 plus students and disappear into the forest and then ask for governments to pay ransoms. And if those ransoms are not paid, they're killed. So the government has been dealing with a lot. The army in Nigeria has been really overstretched. As we speak right now, there's not a day that goes by that there is not one killing or one kidnap. As we speak, the Nigerian Defense Academy was raided by these bandits, and it's in Kaduna State, which is somewhere in the northwest of the country. This for a lot of Nigerians is the worst hit ever because this is where we train all our military personnel, whether they're Navy, they're Air Force, the Army, and this is like a major blow on the country. But then many people who are angry in the country right now are mostly angry at the president because of his body language as to dealing with the issue of terrorism. Why? Because when the president decided to run for office, this is a president that has tried to be president 4 times, and finally he became president. And he campaigned on 3 things. He promised that he was going to put an end to terrorism. He promised that he was going to um, give us employment, and he was going to deal with corruption, which was a big, deep-seated issue in Nigeria. Is still a deep-seated issue in Nigeria. Unfortunately, the president has not been able to do any of these things, and the issue of terrorism is building up. Now, our president, was the first person to talk about the Afghanistan thing on Financial Times and saying that if we do not deal with our problems and the issue of Boko Haram and the bandits in Africa, we might just be facing an Afghanistan issue or an Afghanistan situation. But the question is, what is the president doing so that we can avert that situation? There are also people who feel that our president is not dealing with the situation because most of the people who have been fingered to be in alliance with these bandits and the herders, the supposed herders, are from the same tribe as Mr. President. Our president is from the Fulani tribe, and most of the
Oh,
people who are
wow.
nomads, herders, yes, are from that tribe. And so they feel that the president is dealing with it in kids' gloves. But now it has become a hydra-headed monster, and it's now spreading down into the south of the country. Now, the southern governors in my country have kicked against open grazing because normally in Nigeria there used to be open grazing, so the nomads can come all the way from the north down to the south, and nobody would disturb them. But now, because these people are now going to farms, Nigeria is a very agrarian country, so we every part of the country we are always farming. We have farms. There's mostly food everywhere in Nigeria. And so the farmers in those southern parts of the country, even the north west, have been complaining about the fact that these herders are bringing their cattle to destroy farms. So we're having food shortages, we're having issues of people being killed in their farmlands. And so southern governors in the country have decided to put a stop to open grazing. If you must graze on the land in the south, then you must abide by certain rules. You must get your own ranching, because we want to be able, because the governments want to be able to stem, the attacks. So if we look at all what's happening, it's building up to a point where we might just have an Afghanistan situation where these bandits are taking over land. And the fact that they've been able to go as far as the NDA, they kidnapped a general who was more like a commanding officer at the Defense Academy. They injured a couple of people. The government released a statement saying that this would not deter the fight against terrorism. But we have had generals, we've had retired service chiefs complaining about how this issue is being handled, and the fact that there seems not to be a will from the government to deal with the issue. And this is how it starts. If the government is not dealing with the issue, and then these people seem to be getting an upper hand, or they see that the government is weak and take advantage of that weakness, we might just be heading towards an Afghanistan situation. I'm going to keep quiet and let you guys talk.
Well, go ahead, Scott.
I found that fascinating. Marianne, my experience has been from other countries, say watching Iraq, watching Syria, watching Afghanistan, that when you get these disaffected groups, if you want to call it that, who feel they're discriminated against, they feel that they don't have an economic chance, when they resort to, for example, what you've called banditry, very eloquent because local, but when it turns into a movement, such as an Islamic State, such as a Taliban, it's when you get like an ideological umbrella for this. What chance is there that first of all, is that accurate, that in Nigeria, that this movement to be a challenge that you're explaining would need an ideological umbrella to hold all these bandits together? And if so, what type of ideology would it be that you would think would turn it into a national challenge?
So it's easy to lump Boko Haram and deal with their issue because they're outrightly against Western education. We know that, and so we can deal with that, even though it's still a war that it's a non-conventional war that we're still having to deal with. But then for the bandits, we have no idea what these people want. They just seem to be killing, and they seem to be excited by just kidnapping and torturing, and so it's very difficult to actually say, okay, this is how we deal with them. So it's tough. It's really tough, and because of the way that they're killing and the fact that they're just going into farmland and destroying stuff, it has caused certain non-state actors in different regions of the country to come up. So people who would on a normal day not be able to speak to the government or even get the attention of the people are now cropping up from different regions. So you have an Nnamdi Kanu who is from the southeast, who's asking for a secession because they feel that they're no longer safe within the enclave called Nigeria. And on the south, from the southwest, you have a Sunday Igboho who is for the Yoruba nation, and mostly the southwest is made up of Yorubas. Now, there are three major tribes in Nigeria. You have the Igbos, the Hausas, and the Yorubas. And the Igbos are in the southeast. The southwest is mostly Yorubas, and the north, obviously, you have Hausas, Fulanese, and the Kanuris. So these non-state actors are beginning to agitate for secession, and they're calling on their people to support them because they feel that the government at the center is weak. And I always say that non-state actors come up when government is unable to do its job, because if government had dealt with these issues early enough and addressed it, and not because if the government is quiet, what we see as those who report on these issues every day is that the government is quick to react when people react to these herders or point fingers that to the herders. That's when you hear the government speak. So it looks more like the government is in support of the herders, or the government is saying, well, don't call them herders, don't call them Fulanis. But then Nigerians know that the people who are mostly nomadic are Fulanis, and Nigerians are saying, if these people are parodying or masquerading as Fulanis, what are you doing to make sure as Fulanis that you absolve yourself of this? And make it not look like it's an ethnic cleansing. Now, Nigeria as a country is already divided along ethnic lines and religious lines, so it's already a problem. And when you have to put this on top of it, obviously it's the boiling kettle, and if you do not take it off the fire in time, it's going to boil over. So there's so many the mixed reactions. I run a political show in Nigeria. It's a
A
Monday
very
to
good
Friday
one.
on cable TV, and these are the issues that we talk about. Yesterday, I had a retired military chief on my show, and he kept saying that he feels that the government is not listening, that the government wants to do whatever it likes because they have been talking, but nobody seems to be listening or doing anything to deal with the issue. And again, he feels like there is an agenda to Islamize Nigeria, which I find very disturbing because Nigeria is a secular country and we have
Hmm.
Muslims, we have Christians, we have traditionalists, and even though people bring up these issues because they play into the sentiment of people, but then Nigerians are beginning to believe a little bit of it because of the president's body language. And for me, I keep wondering. Yesterday, a governor of a state where people are killed daily was on the show challenging Mr. President to deal with the issues. And guess what? Those people who presented, the anchors of the show, were invited by the National Broadcasting Commission because they said they allowed a person to come on air to criticize the president. But we are in a democracy, and the president has to be, criticized. If people feel that the president is not living up to his mandates, they have every right
Uh-huh.
to. And as an anchor of a show, I cannot preempt what you're going to say, Scott. I cannot preempt what you're going to say, Rev. So, I mean, really, I can only, if you say something that is not factual, I can say, well, if you do not have the facts, then I'm going to arrest that particular issue. But you don't go about arresting, journalists because you think that a person came on the show to criticize Mr. President. So Nigeria has a lot on its plate. We have seen the government try over and over again to gag the press because they feel like certain information should not be allowed to go on air, or that the people are victimizing the president or making the president look bad. It's a potpourri of issues, and I mean, really, if I start talking about it, we're not going to leave, and I'm not going to go back to work. So, but these are the things. The reasons why we have bandits in the first place is there's poor education in those areas. There's almost zero education in those areas. Infrastructure is terrible. They don't have health care. There are no job opportunities. And can we blame the federal government? No. We do have governments who have come, previous governments who have been there, who should do their job. So it's a leadership problem. And yes, we know that Nigeria is supposed to be running a national or federal government, but then what we run is somewhat of a unitary government where power rests at the center. So a governor on paper can be the chief security officer, but then in the whoever is the chief of police in the state or the chief of the army in the state has to report to his boss at the federal capital territory to be able to get anything done in the first place. So the hands of the governors are indeed tied. So again, the power and the bulk stops at Mr. President's table. So if the president does not do anything, nothing happens in those states. So in dealing with insecurity, we need the government, the federal government's nod. In dealing with infrastructure development, yes, the governors have a role to play, which they have not played, and they need to deal with that. If you can have good education, if you can deal with the poverty that the people in the states are dealing with, if you can employ the young people in those areas, and because you know what they say, the devil's workshop is an idle mind. So if you give these people what to do, there will not be as many recruits for these people who are coming from the Sahel to cause confusion in the countries in this, in West Africa. So it's because these people have seen the weaknesses and the loopholes in our systems. They have taken advantage of it. So if government wants to fight this war, it's not just with guns and bullets. They need to fix the system. I'm going to shut up now.
Wow, that has been an amazing primer on what is going on in Nigeria, and I really appreciate that because I try to catch the snippets of your program as often as I can, and having that breakdown of politically what's happening and what's happening with your president. Just a quick thought though. What I didn't hear you mention is any kind of legislature in the Nigerian government. It, how is that structured? Are there, like a Senate and a House kind of thing, or a ministers or anything?
Yes, we do. We have two houses. We have the upper and the lower. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. And in the states, we have the houses of assemblies where it's just like Congress, but they're state level.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the people who make the laws that regulate the country. But then in Nigeria, because our political parties don't necessarily have ideologies that are clear cut, like you have the Republicans and the liberals and the Democrats in Nigeria, you just have political parties and people who have interest, and you see a lot of cross capiting. So if my party is Party A, and I'm in power, I'm strong arming people, maybe because they're dirty, maybe they have stolen certain monies from public purses, and they do not want to go to jail. They cross over to my party so that they are safe, and
Mm.
that's what we see. So the corruption that the president promised that he was going to fight, he's not able to do that because his own political party is throwing its doors open to the same people that they campaigned against, who were corrupt people and have stolen monies from the nation's coffers. And so the people who feel the national, who have the highest number of people on the floor of our National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, are mostly from the president's party. So whatever they do is obviously going to be in favor of Mr. President and not necessarily about the people. And Nigerians have also queried how much these people earn and the kinds of ridiculous allowances that they take home every day. There's something called a newspaper allowance and a hardship allowance, and we're wondering why you should be paid taxpayers' monies for all of that. And they take home vehicles that are very luxurious and very expensive. Yet, the laws that are passed most times on the floor of the National Assembly is not necessarily in the best interest of the average Nigerian. So we seem to be getting the short end of the stick, and so it makes it's very Nigeria's politics and the political arena is very complicated. But again, we cannot just really blame our leaders because our leaders are a reflection of the people. We seem to also be aiding and abetting this kind of leadership, and that's why it's been going on for so long. But then for the government that is in power today, they came on to us as one that was coming to clean the mess up, one that was a saintly government. But unfortunately, they've not been able to even scratch the surface.
Well, that, and I'm gonna let you jump in, Scott. I know you need to get going. I'm sure you've got to get going too, Marianne. You've got
I
a
got to go in
show
two
that you
minutes.
do. 2 minutes, okay. Let me let you wrap real quick because I know he's got maybe 4 minutes. And the thing I want to say though, putting yourself in with the average Nigerian, my goodness, I want to meet more Nigerians because you know you
I
average
think you're better off.
Nigerians are smart
You
as
should just be
hell.
an American. You're better off.
But go ahead, Marianne, and Scott, have a quick thought. Then we'll let Marianne wrap up, and then we'll wrap up with you.
Just, actually, let me just feed this to Marianne for her exit. If you could, there's so many places that you identify where there's issues in Nigeria. If there was one starting point to begin with to carry out the necessary reforms or accountability, where would you start now? Can you start within the system or do you have to change the system at this point?
So the first problem that I think that the Nigerian people and the country has is the constitution. The constitution that we have was passed over by a military system, which so there are lots of things that do not align with a democracy, and we need to rewrite that document. First things first, and secondly, I think that we start at the basics. The most important thing that you should give the average person is the basics: water, electricity. Nigeria in the 21st century still is struggling with electricity. We do not have 24 hours electricity. The average Nigerian who's a second class citizen is her own government, because she provides her own water, she gets her own light because you have to have generators or solar because you can't rely on the national grid. The average person pays so much money to get healthcare because our healthcare system is in shambles. But our president and senators and all our leaders fly to the US or to the UK to get medical care. But then the one in the country is left to be in shambles as we speak. Resident doctors in my country are on strike because their normal allowances and their COVID allowances have not been negotiated properly and are not being paid. And the government is strong arming them to come back to work, but they're saying we risk our lives every day. and you cannot even afford to pay us what we are due. But then you make out large sums of money to yourselves as allowances, and then you fly out of the country because you know that you have already destroyed our medical care. And so you go where you can get better medical care. Why not stay here and see what we're experiencing? So that way, maybe it would give you a nudge to change the system. So the basic amenities at the disposal of the average Nigerian is nowhere to be found. And we do not see government, and it's not just about this government, even the previous governments, all the way from the military down to the civilian, nothing has been done. And it looks like it's an attempt to cripple the average Nigerian and keep them, receive coming for the breadcrumbs, which is something that Nigerians are beginning to, fight against. That we put you there. It's not the other way around. So you're supposed to be serving us, and if you can't do that, then we're going to show you the way out. So, but it's building up to that. If we can deal with the basics, give the average Nigerian the basics, and let them enjoy the basic amenities of life. And the reason why you were put there is to serve the people. If you can serve them and not yourself, we will begin to address the issue. But we cannot address the issue from the middle. It has to start from the bottom.
Well, I don't know who in Nigeria, because you talked about political parties, but I don't know, Madam President. I think you should run.
No. I like being a journalist. I think I like that. I like being a journalist. But I have
I
to
thought
go,
you'd
guys.
say no.
It has been really fun. I have to go.
Yeah, you go. Great to see you. We'll do this again, I hope. Thank you,
Nice to
Marianne.
meet you, Scott.
Fantastic, Marianne.
Thank you.
That was Marianne Okan, everybody. The wow, that was
a lot
just
of bonus. That was
yeah,
great.
yeah. I've been trying to find time for Marianne and I to do a conversation for a while. So Scott, I'm going to let you wrap it up. I know you got like 2 minutes yourself.
Well, this is a great way to bring it back because I think Marianne makes a point, and before I come back and watch you do the dedicated program with her, which is going to be 2 hours to get deep on Nigeria, she makes a point that I think links, Nigeria with Afghanistan, with other countries that you start from. And that is, cut through the overlay in terms of, the military and the religious ideology and what the basics that move countries, that fragment countries, that could bring countries back together is whether or not people have water, electricity, shelter that take place. And the problem in Afghanistan has been that those basics weren't being provided for. And we can talk about the general reasons why that happened, but that was the reason why the Taliban could move into areas and say, look, you don't have the basics, you don't have security, you've got a corrupt government that's not actually caring about you. And that's how they get traction. It will also be the flip side that if the Taliban cannot now provide for the basics across the country, they're the ones that are on the hook for this. And Perry Pilot's question, which is fantastic, so we'll come back at some point and talk about it, Rev, is that Perry Pilot asked, do we have a humanitarian crisis that's going to happen in Afghanistan in months? It's not months, it's now. So the one thing beyond what you're hearing in the headlines, understandably, but unless you go to, say, Al Jazeera, which is the one place that's noticing it, is that 14 million Afghans who live, who basically are food deprived, 2 million of them children.
Oh.
And there's Monique, our good friend. Just as I'm exiting, you can hand over to her.
I just
right?
finished recording. I'm so sorry. I came in right.
That's okay.
It threw you in automatically. It does that sometimes. Hang on one second, Monique. We're going to talk, and Scott's going to jump. He's got a radio show to do.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I'm sorry I missed the discussion. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Well, hang on.
You can always replay it later. But so just to say, Rev, that you've got the UN making the announcement that $800 is needed, $800 million is needed immediately. I doubt the international community is going to mobilize quickly enough to provide that aid. And so therefore you have these imminent questions which should concern us both in reading what's going to happen in the country, but then just as human beings as an activist, which is that it will be issues of energy, water, and food that become the issues outside the headlines to keep an eye on in Afghanistan as it goes forward. Of course, Afghanistan is different from Nigeria in terms of the trajectory. that what happens in Nigeria, those local parties, the local players differ from Afghanistan, but the fundamentals of humanity are still the driving force. They're still the catalyst for what happens next.
Well, my
And with
friend, that was
I got to thank
great.
you.
Way to wrap that up. And wow, Nigeria and Afghanistan in one sitting. And now we're going to bring Monique in and expand the conversation for a little bit if she wants to. I'll see you soon, man. Let's
Take
do this
care,
next
folks.
week for sure.
Stay safe.
You too, my friend. You be safe as well. That was Scott Lucas, everybody. Scott is professor emeritus at the University of Birmingham. Though he is from Alabama, it's the Birmingham in England. And what an honor it is every time to have Scott on here. And to have Marianne Okan, I got to say, I'm flummoxed. I am beside myself because she is an amazing journalist, and I have gotten to know her very well as a friend because of HAPS. And like I said, it's been tough to get our schedules together. So getting a good dive on Nigeria and politics there was fantastic. Now let's continue the fun that we get to have on HAPS, and that is to meet incredibly interesting and knowledgeable people. And Monique, I know you were on with Olga the other day, and I happened to catch that show, and I was like, wow, these are people that I want to know. So tell my folks a little bit about who you are and kind of what you're about, what you kind of go on the air and talk about. And I noticed you got a nice Shure microphone like I do. So
of course. Well, this is with the production. Right, Rev? We're doing Kremlin File, right? The production itself, the podcast. We're on episode number 4. Thank you for sending me the invitation. By the way, I'm sorry that I'm late.
Oh no, you're not late. It's HAPS. We're on whenever.
HAPS. We just come. That's it. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So we were just finished recording, with John Foley, and it's going to be a fantastic episode that's coming up, and it's all on Russian interference in the military.
Okay, so this, and definitely put your
it's
info
absolutely
in the chat.
It's great. Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. It'll be coming out later on in October because we're ahead of schedule with a lot of our recordings and things like that. But I just want to say hi to everybody. And thanks for sending me the invite, Rev. I love listening to you, and I love listening to Scott, who is a real buddy. He's on our Tuesdays, live. So we hope, Rev, that you're going to be able to come over and migrate also onto our live session at one point. We
I
talk
would love
about
to
Russia.
join you guys. That would be fun.
Yeah, input and whatever you can bring. And we would just love to. I'm here in Siena, Italy. It's just so that people know where I am.
I bring that.
Now, another big problem we have is trying to get together with our schedules because I'm here in Siena, Italy. And I'll just say that my buddy Olga, we started this whole project. It was sort of, how can I put it? We just meshed, together. I interviewed her because I had a podcast previously, all on international relations. And specifically, I concentrated a little more on Europe and also North America, Canada, and the US. I got so pissed off of everything that was happening. I would say after 2014, 2015, that I said, okay, well, I've got to start studying all this stuff. I need to see what is going on because the world was changing in ways that I just I couldn't recognize anymore. So that's why I started the whole thing. And I said, oh man, I really, really got to interview Olga because she knows her shit. Okay. And I want interesting people. I want to talk to whoever knows their stuff. Okay. So I really wasn't looking for people who had big names. I wanted people who know their stuff because that's the important part.
That's huge. That's a fantastic way
like
to do
Scott, right? I mean, I listened to Scott on the radio. Actually, it's funny because every morning going to the university, I teach at the University of Siena. Okay. I teach political communication. So every morning No, I listened to Scott because he had this little, little spot on a radio station in London. So I said, wow, actually, it was it's a national radio station. And I just listened to him every morning. I said, man, I got to talk to this guy, because he knows his stuff, right? So that's how that happened with Olga. That's how I called her and I said, I need to talk to you about Russia, and I need to talk to you about Trump, and I need to talk to you of what the hell Russia is doing to our world.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, sure. So we started talking, and the interview, Rev, went from, it was supposed to be something like 45 minutes. That was the original, thing. And we talked for something like 3 hours. So
Oh,
after
wow.
that, she became my soul sister. Yeah. And then we just started talking with each other and sending information and things like that. So,
Well, what I
and
know, Scott mentioned earlier in the broadcast that one of the things that he likes about Haps actually is
Yeah.
that, he can kind of, if he's on Indian television or American television or whatever, he can't necessarily put his personal passion into something. And of course, one doesn't have to. I mean, but
Sure.
one certainly can. And I know that you are upset about what's happening, in Afghanistan
I'm livid.
right now, and
Mhm.
at whatever level you want to take that, you don't have
Yeah.
to take it into a personal space, but tell us, what's bugging you about Afghanistan right now, because it's
Ah,
it's a little bit, it's kind of sad actually.
the humanitarian side for me is very, very important. Um, that part of it really, really kills. Seeing so many people who have been left, and seeing, especially from, and I know, I don't know whether I'm going to get killed for this or not, but being a woman, knowing that maybe there were not the whole female population that was benefiting from what was happening there with the intervention of the Allied forces, NATO forces, Operation Resolute, because that's what was going on there with the American forces. And there were so many humanitarian groups that were operating. I do realize, I mean, as Americans, maybe, that wasn't the original intent for nation building, but I'm a firm believer in nation building. I'm a firm believer in helping those that do want, right, to get their act together and offer a life well-being to their citizens. So I can't tell you how much I actually cried when all of this was going down. So that's my personal thing, and also I think it could have been delayed. This is my own personal. It has nothing to do with the podcast or anything to do with what Olga believes or what anybody else believes. I think I can speak here, right, Rev, in a very honest way, because I believe that honesty is always something that listeners or whoever, right, is tapping into what we're saying. So I'll always say something that is true, that comes from my heart. So that, to me, from the on the human, it was human rights on that humanitarian level. I was devastated, devastated,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, you know what? I was listening to Evelyn Farkas, who will also be on Kremlin File, and she said, look, they could have planned this, and it didn't have to be done right until, right, giving a deadline of September. It could have been done phased out, really, because you're leaving a country. It's easy to go in, it's difficult to get out. Okay. And it's got to be done in a certain way. I didn't understand the rush. I really, really did not understand the rush. Okay.
Yeah,
But that's
Marianne.
but that's, again, this is what I personally believe. At the same time, I'm sure that there are reasons, right? That, and I know, but I mean, Americans, anyone can think differently. That's not the problem.
Yeah,
That
I
is
know.
my
I get.
understanding.
Let me ask you two real quick, because Scott's from Alabama. Where are you from, Monique?
Toronto, Canada.
Toronto. Okay. I couldn't quite figure out
Yeah,
the
no, no,
accent.
no. Yeah, no, no. I was born in Toronto, but I've been here
Uh-huh.
for almost over 25 years in Siena,
Ah,
Italy. Yeah,
love
yeah,
it. I
yeah.
have a great great-grandfather who got his naturalization, U.S. citizenship, by fighting in World War I for America, but was an Italian immigrant at Ellis Island.
Wow.
So it is probably a tie for the most genetic that I am is Italian, but and I definitely have I definitely got the greasy, but no wrinkles much for 55.
Sei
You're
bellissimo,
old.
sei bellissimo, non c'è un problema.
Bellissimo.
Sei
Thank you, Dee.
bellissimo.
But what I was going to say was having. Well, Joe Biden, I get a lot of flack, even from the executive producer. Is what I call my wife, but the executive producer. He's like, don't go on that show picking on Joe Biden. Joe Biden's doing everything that he can,
Right.
and as best he can. And I've said it before. God bless America and Joe Biden for getting us, as far as he's gotten us here with the COVID. And I mean,
Yes.
when America
Yes.
wants to do something, America
yeah.
does it. Whatever you want to say about politics or, capitalism or whatever, people know what I feel.
Agreed.
But when America wants to get something done, I mean, look how fast we all got vaccinated if you wanted vaccinated anyway.
There you go.
And, but I do greatly I greatly agree, and again, man, Joe Biden is, an old school liberal and, not 100% my kind of guy politically, but, I mean, damn good job that he's done in so many ways. And he's between a rock and a hard place. But I want to agree 100% with you just on the time frame. He's kind of failed at the border, but I understand Corona has been, is even affected by that. But this, everybody's like defending and the people that give me flack, the resistors and everything. Because I'm so far left, I make communism look like a right-wing ideology, by the way. So
you'd fit in really, really well here in Italy.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes,
We had both. We've got extreme left, extreme right. Okay, and they duke it out basically.
Well, I'm going to come visit.
I'm in the
Every
middle.
Time I make a new friend in
I'm
Europe,
in the middle.
I'm inviting myself. So but the time frame that would have been the thing that I would have adjusted. I don't have the intelligence or the military intelligence maybe to make those decisions, but the time frame, even because Trump did put something in motion, and it's hard to stop things in motion, even militarily and ideologically and politically. And it's been a 20-year war, and it would be nice if it were over and everything. And you're Joe Biden, and you want to end the war, and you didn't want to put the troops in there and all that stuff, but my God, I know we couldn't have just started like taking people out 3 months ago in mass. Everybody would have been like, oh shit, they're leaving or whatever.
Right.
And that would have caused some panic. But
the French had started. The French had started in May for evacuating. Okay, they had started evacuating people. The Italians had started evacuating people. So, I mean, there were no other nations, 70 nations, to be precise, that were getting their people out and things like that. So that was happening. I think in Biden's case, I'm trying to look at this holistically in the sense of full context. Okay. I think that his foreign policy over the past while, what I'm seeing is that he's concentrating basically on what he believes, what the administration believes, or whoever it is that is advising him that China is the where he would like to put the resources. Okay, that's my feeling. That's what observing things, because if you see what's going on in Europe, where he has lifted the sanctions for Russians, and especially to do with Nord Stream 2. This is important. Not paying enough attention, I would say, to the Baltic states and also to Ukraine, anything that is right on the
powder kegs over there too.
Exactly. Okay. I mean, these are serious. These are areas where they're amassing troops, as we know. All right. And you have areas in, let's say, the It's not coming to mind right now. I'm going with a blank because I'm all over the place. But
No, it's fine.
the Azov
Nice style,
Straits,
by the way.
okay, all right. The
It's
Azov
called
Straits,
swirling,
where
somebody
okay,
told me, or
Russia is,
popcorning.
yeah. I mean, look, in the Eastern Mediterranean, okay, this is what we're
Mhm.
talking about. All right, so these are areas that need attention. So and he's not paying enough attention there.
Well,
Europe
yeah, and
needs to
actually,
shore up as well, because it's not just the states that needs to take. Okay, it doesn't have to be the states taking the lead all the time. They
mhm,
should be able to find partners, right, who are reliable and who are investing, okay, in let's say serious defense. um and this is important. This is not, you know so I think that when Biden got into office, and COVID, I think, was the first thing, okay,
mhm.
on his mind, and bringing that under control, because you don't bring that in control. I mean, you've got Americans dying. I mean, let's be very
Right.
frank here. Okay. You had an insurrection on January the 6th of Americans killing each other. All right.
Mhm,
I'm talking to you from a European standpoint of what I see
mhm.
from outside looking in.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do.
And this is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing. Okay, so, and it's funny because I'm from Toronto. I also met my sister lives, by the way, close to Indiana. So
Oh,
she's been naturalized American now for a few years. My nephew lives in New York.
nice.
And so I do understand, right? When she talks to me about things, right? We try to understand and exchange views on what is happening. But from my understanding, right from the get go, you had an insurrection. So there is internally, okay, a very, very, very precarious political situation. You've got COVID, health,
Right.
security, right? So this is the number one thing that he's thinking of. I don't think he was thinking of everything else. And I guess after that, it's like, okay, well, let's see where we're going forward here. Is it China? Where are we going? Where are
Well,
we going to be putting? Do we need to renew our military? Okay.
yeah, I gotta
Bring it
say,
into the 21st century. What's going on with that, right?
yeah,
Military
not
spending.
giving,
That's another thing, right? The Navy.
right,
Okay.
right, not giving. Well, I don't even want to put it that way. The 4 years of Trump here in America and the destruction of the working, the actual folks. I can't think. My mind is slipping here, but the folks in D.C. That are actually doing the work, right? The diplomats and everything that are doing work in
Sure.
Ukraine and all across the world, and
Yeah.
we've got
Yeah.
Tony, what is it, Blinken now,
Oh.
that is Secretary of State. But so all of that was torn down,
Oh
literally. They
yeah.
weren't
Oh
filling
yeah.
positions, and they were
Yeah.
doing all kinds of
Yeah.
crazy stuff. So even just the momentum of putting that all back into place after 4 years of
It was
destruction,
crazy. It was
it's
crazy,
got to be
Rev.
really tough. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
To let foreign policy go for 6 months, 7 months of your first at becoming president of the United States is not something a president normally has to choose between. So as tough as I am
These are
on Joe Biden
different.
about
Yeah.
not sticking around a little longer or something, I get it.
Yeah.
Like it's a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'm not very happy, okay, with in my personal view, I'm not very happy. At the same time, I do try to see what is the broader picture instead of just zeroing in, on different things. But I was going to bring up something because you had talked about Europe. I interviewed a few politicians on my previous podcast who were in the foreign ministry and also at the EU level as well, where they're in the European Parliament. And they said that the Trump years were an absolute disaster. There was a real divorce. Okay. They said, well, he was just transactional. That's all it was. Okay. You give me this. Okay. I want this, and you give me this. That's it. All right. So they just didn't even know how to handle him. Okay. They said it was just absolutely crazy. So when I don't think there's one European politician that I know personally, okay, who I mean they all celebrated, right, when Biden was coming, maybe there was a bit more, how can I put it? We had higher expectations in terms of foreign policy. Okay. Sort of like, yay, he's back. Okay. Yay. But he's not.
Well, let's hope that,
not yet.
yeah, let's
Well,
hope
maybe
that,
not yet. Let's give him
you
some
know, I
time.
mean,
But there's also the elections coming up.
right. Well,
Maybe he
this is
wanted to
not
get
good.
this out of the way. Well, maybe he wanted to get this out of the way before, having to face. Maybe this is one way of
Yeah,
maybe
he's got
getting
more than a
some
year. Maybe you're
electors
right.
coming. But I don't know how's he polling now, Rev? Do we know?
49,
I didn't check today.
which somebody pointed out that was the high point of Trump ever, 49.
Right.
So 49 doesn't sound very good. It is not, but 49 is still pretty darn good at this point. No, the midterm elections, are a big factor. That you bring up a good point. Maybe getting rid of this now makes more sense. What I will say in America, as being here for 55 years, is that Americans don't like seeing Americans dying. And so what they did in order to stay in Afghanistan and Iraq more or less for 20 years was they just didn't show them dying on TV.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, Jake Tapper doesn't show it, and Anderson Cooper doesn't show it. I don't know. We've got David Newman, who is the one of the co-founders of HAPS, who I invited on here. And one of these days, I hope we can have a discussion with David about why they didn't, hasn't been shown. To the extent, and in a lot of ways, it's because Americans don't want to see it, I'm sure. But he right now, it is sad to me that political calculation of potential genocide, because that's what we're talking about in Afghanistan, is more politically palatable than staying a little longer and maybe even look. I said it about communism in terms of my right, my left wing tendencies. I will say this. I say it all the time. I'm a pacifist until you punch me in the face. I'm not going to just lie down here and be a pacifist. But I generally am not about war. But when we're in it, and we don't try to whatever win it means. But hello, JB from Sweden. But when we're in it,
from Sweden,
and we abandon like that, that's a big problem.
I
But
know.
the political calculus is apparently because I just like poor Kamala Harris right now. Like her best thing right now just be to crawl under a rock and let all this slide by.
Is she still in the area? Overseas?
That?
I have
yes,
to say that
she's been overseas.
She's still there,
I
right?
Suspect it was good timing to get her overseas.
Oh man, I know. I don't envy her. I don't envy.
No, and she needs the foreign
position right
job,
now,
so she's going to be traveling a lot.
Right. No, look, Rev, I agree on the abandonment thing. As I said, because I believe in nation building, and I believe that nation building takes years and years and investment, because you were putting in democracy. Okay, we know, right, from the States, here in Italy, all right, you know how long it takes for institutions to root, to get into, right, for people to understand that they are the state. Okay, you are, all right, your institutions, right, they represent you. Right. I mean, this is it, but it takes a long time. Look at Europe, how long it took. Okay. I'm living in a city, Rev, that we had one of the first democratic governments. Okay. 1246. This is what we're talking about. And you go to my city hall. Okay. And one day I'm going to show you pictures. You go to my city hall. Okay. And there is a fresco. Okay. That is about good and bad government. Good and bad
a political commentary in fresco.
Exactly, where they showed the virtues, okay, of good government and the virtue and what are the vices of bad government. We're talking about a city, a republic that was already doing voting, okay, at that time, okay, and these are things that take time. Now, I'm not saying that in Afghanistan, the states should have been there for 800 years, but we're talking about that we need to take time for these things. If you're going to do something, okay, maybe it's the Italian in me, you got to do something, you do it right. Sorry,
Well,
it's
yeah,
like,
I mean,
you know, this sounds a bit flippant, but I mean, that's why I'm upset. It's nation building. Nation building takes time,
well,
right?
look,
It does.
we do something with the nonprofit that I've been helping,
Right.
establish over about the last 10 years, called Culturally Responsive Evaluation. We have something that called a culturally responsive practice. I'll put it in easy
Oh yeah.
terms. If I'm your therapist and you're my patient, I'm pink, you're purple. Um, we have a little bit of a cultural difference between us. So we're going to
Yeah.
need to kind of work on that cultural difference. I'm a man, you're a
Exactly.
woman. We're going to have to work on those differences a little bit to kind of get some parity before we can even dive deep into the
Sure.
therapy. So
Sure.
we need look, the Afghans. We were just talking about Nigeria, and Marianne was breaking down the 3 tribes there. But when you're coming from tribal and Bedouin societies that literally don't believe in some ways in land ownership, or don't believe in anything but one leader, right? You're just a plebe, you're
Yeah.
just a serf,
Yeah.
and you have a
Sure.
leader, your mullah or whoever that it is. That's a structure of a society that doesn't really fit in with democracy, right? So you can't, if you're going to do nation building, I think you got to think in lifetime kind of scales. That because
Sure.
in a place like Afghanistan, you're going to need to invest 50 or 75 years in helping
Exactly.
that culture understand democracy from their perspective. Certainly not right of us to go in and say, "Hey, we want to teach you baseball,"
No,
and
the top
the Canadians
down.
go in and want to teach you
Yeah.
hockey. It
Yeah.
still needs to be your
Well,
country,
yeah. And I mean, look, the top down is something that never really works. Okay.
right?
I mean, really, if I mean, in history, we would have to go back. Here in Italy, it's one of the big problems that we had because, as Cavour said, we've created the state, now we have to create Italians. Okay. So this we've created Italy, now we have to create Italians. So this
Right.
has been going on. I mean, this is what we grapple with. Okay.
Hmm.
But in our situation, as I said, we've had a lot of different city states that already, okay, there was some sort of government, there was an idea. We also had the Renaissance. So okay,
Hey,
this is the
fresco
culture.
painting
We
in
had the
fresh
fresco
plaster,
painting, right? We got
politics.
the
That's
fresco.
cool.
Exactly. I understand what you're saying. This is not something that is the top down approach where we say, okay, our brand of democracy, okay, has to be given, okay, and has to be imposed. At the same time, okay, then I'm sure that there are other ways of organizing, okay, where you have, for example, if you have a Senate, you make some sort of, I don't know, group of elders. There are governments that have this kind of thing. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be exactly right. This is Parliament. We can have a group of elders. All right. I can't remember where it is right now, but I remember, okay, reading about this saying, okay, it's representative. It's representative.
Right.
And
Hey,
it takes years, time.
it does. Hey, my friend Jivanef, or is it Jevanef? I honestly don't know how to pronounce your name. If you can, we've known each other for a while. If you could put it in the comments some way, so I'm pronouncing it. I hate Jeeves. All right. Uh,
Jeeves.
all right. Jeevanath. But is it okay to call you Jeeves, or are you just giving me that clue into how you say your name? Yes, nation building. This is a good conversation to Jeeves is fine, my friend. Fantastic. Call me Rev. The all my friends do. This is a great conversation that I think we'll probably spend a lot of
Yeah.
time on too in the future
Yeah.
as well, because it is something that I've found fascinating, in that most of the time when we have helped install a democracy somewhere,
Mm,
we tend to go with the British system of ministers, because I think of the inherent crazy nature of our American, democracy. Trying to get something like this installed into another country with a different culture,
yeah.
could be quite difficult. But
No, there
again,
has
kind
to
of
be.
talking about a band of nomads, and getting them to understand democracy. Yeah, nation building, it really takes a long time, and I'm 100% for nation building. I get that sometimes it's at the end of a gun, which I don't agree with, but you got to put those guns down,
Well, you need
at some point
security.
and build.
Yeah, well, look, that's a security issue, right? It's
Mhm.
not that you're forcing people. I mean, security is really one of the fundamentals. People have to be able to feel safe, right, to live in their state. So they do need security. This is this is an issue, but these are huge things, Rev. Huge, huge, huge. And I gotta go. I really feel terrible because no, you know why? Because my family's congregating over here, and in
Uh-huh.
a few minutes, okay, you're gonna hear pots and pans.
Nice. I'm on my way.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are you having?
Un po di sugo. We have a little bit of sauce with some pasta, so that's our dinner tonight.
We
But
know the New York
okay.
Italians, they would call that sauce, they call that gravy.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. All right. No, don't tell me these things. Don't tell me these things. But I mean, these are all great, huge, huge, okay, discussions,
Well, as I
topics.
said to Scott and to
Yep.
Marianne, and of course,
Yep.
I will say to
We
Olga
got to
and
get
say
all
to you,
gone here as well.
yeah,
Sure.
this is a
Sure.
really good time frame for me, which works out really well for you guys.
Yep.
So if
Yeah.
you've got some hot thing that's happening,
Sure.
and can jump on at because we jump on at 11 my time, just text me for goodness sakes. We'll
Okay.
jump on because I'm
Yeah.
having
I
a
love
blast.
talking to you, Rev. I love talking to you.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm having a
Fantastic.
blast doing this, and I think it's very
Yeah.
informative for people because
Yeah.
just a regular guy like me, that lives in Chicago, it
Yeah.
helps make me smart.
Oh, I'm sure you are already. I'm sure you don't need me for that, but I can bring a different perspective that maybe a lot of people don't have.
I appreciate
I'm
that
a
very much.
hybrid.
You can.
I'm pretty much a hybrid because born in Canada in Toronto, migrated to Italy. Actually, I studied in London for a little while, and then I came to Italy. And my friends here are international, so we have just a different, there are different mentalities that come from everywhere. Okay,
Well, you know
so
what? That
and
anytime
Scott,
also you want to bring somebody else with another perspective too, and other political folks, journalists, and all that, even a regular
sure,
person,
sure,
because it really one of the things I love about just these kind of interactions is I think about people in history, that were influential and that were connected,
mm,
together, and having these multiple voices
yep,
is just a great thing to have on the show. So I'm
yeah.
gonna actually jump into a therapy session that started 9 minutes ago, and I forgot.
Whoa, good
And
for you, Rev.
so, because my
Ti mando
therapist
un
just texted
bacio.
me.
Okay, great stuff.
All right.
Thank
We'll see you
you,
soon. We'll
thank
talk
you.
soon.
Yeah,
I'll text you on
definitely.
Twitter.
Text. Okay,
All right.
bye.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Monique.
Bye, everybody. Thanks
Kamara?
for
Is that
putting
how we
up
say
for
your last
me.
name?
Camarra. Yep, that's me. Mo.
Kamara.
Just
All
call me
right.
Mo.
Ciao.
You're Rev and I'm Mo. It's really cool.
Rev and
Okay.
Mo. All right.
Rev and
We'll see you
Mo.
later.
All right. Ciao
Ciao.
tutti. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That is our short comment on that. Look, JB, regarding nation building, I can understand both sides, how they logically argue in this topic. Can the price be high for intervention and nation building when it comes to the lives and money spent? And how far should we extend our responsibilities? Well, I will, bye, Christine, everybody, Joy Christine, Rev Mo Show. I like that. JB, I will see if Monique and I can address that question the next time we come together, because there is a lot there to unpack. Though to me, $2 trillion spent over the last 20 years could have been much better spent educating the folks in Afghanistan on the principles and positives of democracy without forcing them to do it. All right, I got to jump. All right, everybody, peace be with you, and namaste.